The fleet will reach our border in 6 hours, and I still have not signed the paper that could stop it. I am Alira Vantor, Queen of the Velsara Empire, and I am standing in a war room that smells of burnt wiring and cold tea, listening to my generals argue about numbers that all mean the same thing. We are losing. We have been losing for 3 years. Our shipyards are empty. Our granaries are empty. Our soldiers are children with borrowed armor, and the enemy is not slowing down to let us catch our breath. Chancellor Owen Marsh stands at the head of the table, his hands folded behind his back, waiting for me to speak. He has waited a long time. Everyone in this room has waited a long time, because the paper sitting in front of me is not a surrender. It is worse, in a strange way, because it asks me to give something no treaty has ever asked a queen to give before. Not land, not gold, not fleets. It asks for me. The Terran Accord has agreed to the terms, Owen says quietly. 1 marriage, 1 binding. In exchange, the humans commit their full military weight against the coalition fleets currently burning our outer colonies. The war ends in weeks, not years. And if I refuse, I ask, though I already know the answer, I ask it anyway, because a queen who does not ask the hard questions is not fit to wear a crown. Then the fleet arrives in 6 hours, says General Draven from the far end of the table, not unkindly. And there will be no one left to argue with in the morning. I look down at the paper. It is such a small thing to hold so much weight. A name is written at the bottom, waiting for my seal beside it, and my breath catches when I read it, because I know that name. Everyone in this room knows that name. Soldiers whisper it like a curse. Prisoners weep when they hear it spoken aloud during interrogation. Even our own scouts, hardened men and women who have seen fleets burn, go quiet when his name comes up in briefings. Daniel Hart. You want me to marry a weapon, I say. I want you to marry a man who has already decided this war should end, Owen replies. The rest is only what the enemy has made of him. I think of the reports. The siege of Calith Reach, where an entire coalition division vanished from the field in a single night, and the only survivor said one name before he stopped speaking altogether. The Battle of the Hollow Straits, where 3 warbirds broke formation and fled rather than face a single human gunship, because word had reached them of who commanded it. I have read these reports the way one reads ghost stories, half believing, half hoping they are exaggerated by frightened soldiers looking for someone to blame. But 6 hours is not very much time to decide whether a legend can be trusted. Bring me everything you have on him, I say. Not the war reports, the man. Owen hesitates, and that hesitation tells me more than any file could. There is very little of the man, Your Majesty, only the myth. I close my eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the crown on my head like it has doubled in size in the last 10 minutes. Outside the window, I can see the lights of the capital, millions of them, each one a family, a child, an old woman putting dinner on the table, without knowing that somewhere in this palace, their fate is being decided over a single sheet of paper. Get me a channel to the Terran delegation, I say. I want to speak with him before I sign anything. The comm officer moves quickly, fingers dancing over a console, and within minutes, a screen flickers to life at the end of the table. I expect a soldier in full armor, hard-eyed and silent, the kind of man the reports describe. What I get instead is someone sitting in what looks like a cramped ship cabin, sleeves rolled to his elbows, a half-finished meal pushed to one side of a narrow table. He looks up at the camera like he has been expecting the call. Your Majesty, he says, and his voice is calm, almost gentle, nothing like the voice I imagine belonging to a man whose name silences soldiers. You know why I am calling, I say. I do. Then you know I have questions. I would be worried if you didn't. There is the faintest curve at the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile but something close to it. Ask me anything, Your Majesty. I promise you a straight answer, whether or not you like what you hear. I study his face on the screen. There is nothing monstrous about it. Tired eyes, a small scar above one eyebrow, dark hair that looks like it has not been properly cut in weeks. If I passed him on the street of my own capital, I would think him a tradesman or a low-ranking officer, nothing more. And yet 3 years of war reports whisper his name like it belongs to something that should not exist. Why does my enemy fear you? I ask directly. Because there is no time left for careful diplomacy. He is quiet for a moment, long enough that I wonder if the connection has failed. Then he says, because I have never once given them a reason to think I would stop. It is not the answer I expected. It is not a boast. It sounds, if anything, like regret. And why should I trust a man my own advisors call a weapon? You shouldn't trust me because of what they call me, he says. You should decide for yourself, after you've actually met me. That's more than most people get before they're asked to marry a stranger to end a war. Something in his voice steadies me, though I cannot say exactly why. Perhaps it is the honesty of it, the refusal to sell himself to me the way Owen has been trying to sell him to me for the better part of an hour. Perhaps it is simply that I have spent 3 years surrounded by people who tell me what I want to hear, and this stranger, this living myth from a species we barely understand, has chosen instead to tell me the truth. 6 hours, I say. That is how long I have before the decision is made for me by an approaching fleet. Then let's not waste them, he says. Sign it if it will save your people, Your Majesty. Not because of anything you've heard about me. Sign it because it is the only door still open, and because I intend to walk through it and end this war, one way or another. You have my word on that, for whatever it's worth to you right now. I look at Owen. I look at General Draven, whose jaw is tight with the effort of staying silent. I look, finally, at the paper in front of me, at the small empty space beside a name that soldiers fear more than death itself. I pick up the pen. For my people, I say quietly, and I sign my name beside his. The screen goes dark a moment later, the channel closing on the other end, and the war room erupts into quiet, controlled motion, officers already moving to draft the formal announcement, to prepare the fleet stand-down orders, to notify the capital that peace, or something shaped like it, has finally arrived after 3 long years of grief. I sit very still in the middle of it all, staring at the space where his face had been on the screen, and I realize I have just agreed to marry a man the entire galaxy fears, without knowing a single true thing about him beyond the sound of his voice and the strange, unshakable calm behind his eyes. 6 hours ago, I was ready to watch my empire burn rather than bow to anyone. Now I am wondering what kind of man could make an entire fleet turn back without firing a single shot, and whether I have just saved my people, or handed them to something far stranger and far more dangerous than any war I have ever known. Owen approaches quietly as the room empties, his expression unreadable. The betrothal ceremony will be arranged within the week, Your Majesty. He arrives on Velsara soil in 3 days. 3 days to prepare a palace for a wedding. 3 days to prepare myself for a husband the galaxy speaks of, the way ancient sailors once spoke of storms, with fear, and with a strange, reluctant respect. I look out at the capital lights again, steady now, safe for one more night, and I whisper the only truth I have left to hold on to. Let us hope the stories are wrong about him, I say, for all our sakes. Owen does not answer. In the silence that follows, I understand that even he is not entirely certain the stories are wrong at all. The morning he arrives, the entire palace goes quiet, in a way I have never experienced before, not even during the worst days of the war. I stand at the top of the grand staircase, dressed in ceremonial silver, watching the landing platform through the tall windows as a single unmarked shuttle descends through Velsara's pale morning sky. I expected an escort, a show of force at least, something to match the reputation that walks ahead of him like a shadow with teeth. Instead, there is only the one small ship, plain and undecorated, settling onto the platform as gently as a leaf touching water. That's it? Whispers Clara Bennett, my closest attendant, standing just behind my shoulder. She has been with me since I was a child, and in all that time I have rarely heard true nervousness in her voice. I hear it now. No honor guard? No warships? Perhaps he doesn't need one, I murmur. The shuttle ramp lowers, and he steps out alone. He is dressed simply, in dark travel clothes with no medals, no rank markings, nothing to announce who he is. He carries one bag over his shoulder, the way a traveler might carry it, not a conqueror. If I did not already know his name, I would think him unremarkable, a courier perhaps, or a low-level diplomat sent ahead of someone more important. And yet the moment his boots touch Velsara soil, every guard along the platform straightens as though a switch has been thrown inside them. Not out of formality, out of instinct. I watch it happen in real time, a ripple of tension moving through professional soldiers who have stood at attention for royalty 1,000 times without ever reacting like this. He walks toward the staircase without hurry, without ceremony, and when he finally reaches the base of the steps and looks up at me, I find myself holding perfectly still, the way one holds still in the presence of something that has not yet decided whether it is dangerous. "Your Majesty," he says, with a small, respectful bow of his head, "Daniel Hart, though I imagine you already knew that." "The whole galaxy knows that," I say, more sharply than I intend. Something flickers across his face, there and gone so quickly I almost miss it. Not offense, something closer to weariness, the look of a man who has heard that exact sentence more times than he can count and has never once found a way to make peace with it. "Most of the galaxy knows a story," he says. "I'd like the chance to be something more than that to you, if you'll allow it." I do not answer immediately. Instead, I study him, searching his face for any sign of the monster the reports describe, and finding only quiet patience, the kind that comes from a man who is used to waiting for others to decide what to make of him. "Walk with me," I say finally, because there is a full court waiting inside to observe our first meeting, and I would rather form my own opinion before theirs is layered on top of mine. We walk the long corridor toward the throne hall together, and for a while neither of us speaks. Servants press themselves against the walls as we pass, eyes lowered, and I notice how carefully he avoids meeting anyone's gaze directly, as though he is trying very hard not to startle them. "You make my staff nervous," I say. "I make most people nervous," he replies. "It usually takes them a while to realize I'd rather not be the reason for it." "And why is that exactly? Why does a name become a thing that frightens soldiers before they've ever seen the face behind it?" He is quiet for several steps before he answers. "Because fear is easier to explain than restraint," he says. "It's simpler for people to believe I am a monster who cannot be reasoned with, than to understand that most of what happened out there, I did because there was no better option left. Monsters don't need context, men do. The betrothal ceremony that follows is a blur of formal speeches and careful smiles, courtiers watching the two of us, the way one watches a pair of unfamiliar predators, placed too close together in the same enclosure. I sit beside him through it all, our hands joined briefly for the ceremonial binding of houses, and I feel the calluses on his palm, rough in a way that speaks of hard work rather than simple violence, and I find myself wondering, for the first time, whether the man beside me and the myth attached to his name are truly the same thing at all. It is 2 days later, during a state dinner meant to formally welcome the Terran delegation, that I see the first real crack in the careful image he has been presenting. Lord Caeth Doran, a member of my own court, who has never hidden his contempt for the peace treaty, rises during the meal with a goblet raised, his voice carrying easily across the hall. "A toast," he says, smiling without warmth, "to the union that will save our empire, though I confess, I wonder how comfortable Her Majesty will be, sharing her bed with something the coalition themselves call a demon." The hall goes utterly silent. I feel my own face go hot with fury, my hand already moving toward the small blade I keep hidden beneath my formal sleeve out of old habit, a habit from years of court politics that have occasionally turned deadly. Daniel does not move. He sets down his glass slowly, calmly, and looks at Lord Doran with an expression that is not anger, not even close to it. If anything, it looks almost like sympathy. "You're afraid," he says simply, and the words land in the silent hall like stones dropped into still water. That's all right. A lot of people are, when they don't understand something, but I'd rather you say it to my face than whisper it behind the Queen's back, so let's talk about it properly, if you'd like. Lord Doran's smile falters. He had clearly expected either violence or wounded pride, some reaction he could use to paint Daniel as dangerous in front of the assembled court. Instead, he is left standing with a half-raised goblet and no response prepared for simple, patient honesty. "I meant no true offense," Doran mutters finally, sitting back down without finishing his toast, and the dinner resumes around us with the particular awkward energy of a room that has just watched someone lose a fight they never realized they were having. Later that night, walking the palace gardens under Velsara's twin moons, I ask him about it. "You could have destroyed him," I say. "A single word from you, and half this court would have believed whatever you claimed. Why let him walk away like that?" "Because that's exactly what they expect me to do," Daniel says, hands tucked into his pockets, eyes fixed on the dark shapes of the garden hedges around us. "Every time someone provokes me, and I answer with force, it proves the story right. It gives people permission to keep believing I'm only what they've heard. I'm trying to give them a different memory to hold on to instead. And if kindness fails, if provoking you eventually works." He glances sideways at me, and for just a moment, something passes behind his eyes, something old and heavy that I cannot quite name. "Then I suppose you'll finally understand why the stories exist in the first place," he says quietly. "But I'd rather you never have to see that side of things, Your Majesty. I've spent a long time trying to make sure people don't have to. I think about Calith Reach. I think about the hollow straits and the frightened prisoners who go silent when his name is spoken. I think about an entire division vanishing from a battlefield in a single night, and a man standing calmly in my dining hall, absorbing an insult with nothing but patience. Chancellor Marsh chose you specifically," I say slowly, putting together a thought that has been forming since the war room 3 days ago. "Not because you were willing to marry a stranger for peace, because of what your name does to our enemies before you ever draw a weapon." Daniel stops walking. He turns to face me fully beneath the pale moonlight, and for the first time since he arrived, I see something like genuine tiredness settle over his features, the mask of calm patience slipping just slightly. "Yes," he admits, "that's exactly why he chose me. I knew it the moment the offer reached the Terran Accord. Your Chancellor didn't send for a husband, Your Majesty. He sent for a weapon he could point at the enemy without ever having to load it himself." The honesty of it steals my breath. "And you agreed anyway." "I agreed," he says, "because ending this war matters more to me than being angry about the reason someone finally asked me to help do it. I've been a weapon for a long time now. If being one more time buys peace for your people, I can live with that. What I'd like, if you're willing to give it to me, is the chance to also be something else while I'm here. Not just the myth your court is afraid of, something quieter than that." I do not answer him right away. Instead, I stand there in the moonlit garden, staring at a man the galaxy fears, who has just admitted, with more honesty than any courtier in my palace has ever shown me, that he is fully aware of being used, and has chosen to allow it anyway, for reasons that have nothing to do with the war and everything to do with the small, unglamorous hope of simply being seen as human. "Walk with me tomorrow," I say finally, "away from the court, away from ceremony. I would like to meet the man, if he is willing to be found." Something shifts in his expression, softening in a way I have not seen since he stepped off that shuttle 3 days ago. "I'd like that very much, Your Majesty," he says. We stand together beneath the twin moons a little while longer, saying nothing else, and for the first time since I signed my name beside his on that fateful paper, I feel something other than fear or duty settle over the strange arrangement my empire has made with him. I feel curiosity, and beneath that, quiet and unexpected, something that feels dangerously close to hope. Over the following weeks, something in the palace begins to change, slowly at first, then all at once, like ice thawing beneath a spring sun that no one quite noticed rising. I begin to see Daniel not as a name attached to fear, but as a man with small, ordinary habits that no legend ever mentions. He wakes early, before even the kitchen staff, and I discover him one morning sitting quietly in the eastern courtyard, watching the sun rise over the mountains with a cup of untouched tea cooling beside him. He prefers simple food over the elaborate court dishes prepared in his honor, and more than once I catch him quietly helping a servant carry something too heavy for one pair of hands. An act so small it should mean nothing, and yet it means everything when set against the stories that follow him. "You're staring again," he says one afternoon, not looking up from the book in his lap, seated on a bench in the garden where I have taken to finding him during the quiet hours between council sessions. "I'm trying to understand you," I admit, sitting down beside him without waiting for an invitation, something I would never have done with any other visiting dignitary. "The reports don't match the man. I keep waiting for one version of you to prove itself the lie." "Maybe they're both true," he says. "People aren't usually just one thing, Your Majesty. Not even the ones the stories turn into monsters." It is Clara who first tells me the true story of Calith Reach, though she does not mean to. We are alone in my private chambers, and she is helping me prepare for a council session when the subject rises naturally, born from idle gossip among the palace staff about the quiet human who has been so unexpectedly gentle with everyone he meets. "Do you know what actually happened there, Your Majesty?" Clara asks carefully, clearly uncertain whether the subject is welcome. "At the Reach?" "Only the official reports. An entire coalition division destroyed in a single night." Clara hesitates, twisting the hem of her sleeve, the way she does when she is nervous about sharing something that might upset me. "That's the story the coalition tells, because it frightens their soldiers into obedience. But one of the survivors was captured afterward and questioned by our own intelligence officers, before the treaty. I read the transcript, months ago, before I understood who Daniel was to become to us." "Tell me," I say, and I mean it as a command, though it comes out softer than I intend. "The division had taken the Reach's civilian population hostage," Clara says quietly. "Thousands of colonists, mostly children and elders, held as leverage against a Terran outpost nearby. Daniel Hart was sent in with a small unit to negotiate their release. The negotiation failed. The coalition commander gave the order to begin executions to force compliance." I feel something cold settle in my chest, already anticipating where this story leads. "He didn't destroy an entire division that night out of anger, Your Majesty," Clara continues. "He did it because the alternative was standing by and watching thousands of innocent people die in front of him while a treaty was still being drafted somewhere far away. The survivor said Daniel gave the commander one final chance to stand down. When the order to fire came anyway, he acted alone, before his own unit had even finished taking position. By the time reinforcements arrived, it was already over. Every hostage was alive. Every soldier who gave that order was not." I just ground. The room is silent for a long moment. I think of the man in the garden this morning, quietly reading with a cup of cooling tea, and I try to reconcile him with the story Clara has just told me, and I find, to my own surprise, that I can. Not because the story is any less terrible, but because I finally understand it was never about becoming a legend at all. It was about a single impossible choice, made in a single impossible moment, that the rest of the galaxy has spent years turning into a myth he never asked for. He carries that with him, I say quietly. Every day. That's what I've been seeing in his eyes, when he thinks no one is watching. "I believe so, Your Majesty," Clara says. "I don't think anyone has ever simply asked him how he feels about what happened there. Only what happened, and how many died, and how quickly." That evening I find him again in the garden, this time as the sun is setting rather than rising, painting the hedges in deep gold and violet shadow. He looks up when I approach, and something in my expression must give me away, because his own posture shifts slightly, a careful wariness settling over him. "You've heard about the Reach," he says. "It is not a question. Clara told me the true account, not the one the coalition uses to frighten their soldiers." He looks away, back toward the darkening sky, and for a long moment he says nothing at all. "I think about those children sometimes," he says finally, his voice quieter than I have ever heard it. "Not the soldiers, the children. I think about how close it came to going differently, if I'd hesitated even a few seconds longer, if reinforcements had been late, if the commander had given the order 5 minutes sooner instead of 5 minutes later." "You saved them." "I did," he agrees. "But saving people and being at peace with how you saved them are two very different things, Your Majesty. The galaxy sees a myth. My own reflection some mornings sees something closer to a warning." I sit down beside him on the stone bench, closer than court propriety would strictly allow, close enough that our shoulders nearly touch. "I don't see a warning," I say honestly. "I see a man who has been carrying something enormous, alone, for far longer than anyone should have to carry it by themselves." He turns to look at me then, and there is something raw in his expression, something unguarded that I suspect very few people have ever been permitted to witness. "Thank you for saying that," he says quietly. "You're the first person outside my own unit who has ever said it to me without wanting something from me in exchange." We sit together in comfortable silence as the last light fades from the sky, and something settles between us in that quiet, something I do not yet have a name for, though I suspect I will need one very soon. The peace of those weeks does not last, of course. Peace never seems to, not in a palace where old loyalties run deep and new arrangements threaten to upset a great many careful, self-serving plans. The first sign of true danger arrives during a formal council session, 3 weeks into Daniel's stay, when Lord Doran once again rises to speak, this time with a different tone entirely, one carefully rehearsed and dangerously persuasive. "Your Majesty," he says, addressing me directly while carefully avoiding Daniel's gaze, "I bring troubling news from our border scouts. Coalition ships have been sighted, regrouping near the Halvern corridor, in clear violation of the ceasefire terms your new husband was meant to guarantee." Murmurs ripple through the council chamber. I glance at Daniel, who has gone very still beside me, his expression unreadable. "That is not possible," he says calmly. "The coalition command structure I dealt with directly agreed to full withdrawal from that corridor as part of the treaty terms." "And yet here is the report," Doran says, producing a data slate and sliding it across the table toward me with an expression of practiced concern. "Perhaps the coalition never intended to honor an agreement made under duress. Or perhaps," he adds, his voice dropping just slightly, "your new husband's reputation was never quite enough to secure genuine compliance in the first place." I study the report carefully, and something about it nags at me immediately. A formatting inconsistency in the scout designation codes that does not match our standard intelligence protocols. "Where did this report originate?" I ask. Doran hesitates, just barely, before answering. "From an independent scouting vessel operating near the border, Your Majesty." "Independent," Daniel repeats quietly, and I hear the careful control in his voice, the deliberate effort not to accuse anyone outright without proof. "Not military. Not verified through official channels. Are you suggesting I would fabricate a threat to our own empire's security, Terran?" Doran's voice sharpens, genuine anger flashing across his features now, though I cannot yet tell whether it is real or performed for the benefit of the watching council. "I'm suggesting," Daniel says evenly, "that someone in this room benefits a great deal from convincing Her Majesty that the ceasefire has already failed. I'd like to know who that someone is before we act on unverified information and undo everything this treaty was meant to accomplish." The council session ends in tense uncertainty, no resolution reached, and I find myself lying awake that night turning the report over and over in my mind, searching for the thread that will tell me whether Doran is a fool who has been deceived, or something far more dangerous, a man actively working to unravel the fragile peace we have only just begun to build. I do not have to wait long for my answer. 2 nights later, an alarm tears through the palace in the deep hours before dawn, and I wake to the sound of Clara's voice, breathless and urgent, calling my name from just outside my chamber door. "Your Majesty, You need to come now. Something has happened in the eastern wing. I move quickly through the darkened corridors, guards falling into formation around me as I go, my heart pounding with a fear I have not felt since the darkest days of the war itself. When I reach the eastern wing, I find it filled with smoke and shouting, palace guards moving in controlled chaos around a scene I do not yet understand. And there, standing calmly in the middle of it all, unharmed but grim-faced, is Daniel, with 3 unconscious intruders bound at his feet, and a 4th pressed carefully against the wall under his control, disarmed without a single visible mark on him. "They came for you," he says the moment he sees me, his voice tight with restrained tension. "Not for me. For you, Your Majesty. I was in the corridor when I heard them moving toward your chambers." I stare at the bound figures on the ground, my mind racing to catch up with what has just nearly happened. "Who are they?" One of my own guard captains steps forward, examining the intruder's equipment with a grim expression. "Mercenaries, Your Majesty. Unregistered. No affiliation markings, but the weapon signatures match equipment commonly sold through coalition black markets." "Someone hired them," I say slowly, the pieces beginning to align in my mind with terrible clarity. "Someone who wanted it to look like a coalition attack. Someone trying to make it seem as though the ceasefire has already collapsed." Daniel's eyes meet mine across the smoke-filled corridor, and I see in them the same grim understanding that has just settled over me. "Lord Doran," we say, almost in unison. "We have no proof," I say quickly, though every instinct in me insists otherwise. "Then we find proof," Daniel says, his voice hardening in a way I have not heard since the night he arrived. "Because whoever did this wasn't just trying to hurt you tonight, Your Majesty. They were trying to break the treaty itself, using your own death as the excuse to restart a war that's already cost too many lives on both sides." I look down at the bound mercenaries at his feet, then back up at the man who threw himself into danger without a second's hesitation to protect a woman he has known for barely 3 weeks, a woman he married for reasons that began entirely as politics and duty. Something has shifted between us tonight. In the smoke and chaos of an attack meant to shatter everything we have carefully begun building, I do not yet know what to call it, but I know, standing there in the ruined corridor with dawn still hours away, that I no longer see only a myth standing before me. I see a man who chose to stand between danger and a stranger, simply because it was the right thing to do. And I understand, with sudden and unshakable clarity, that the true war has not yet truly begun. The investigation moves quickly once Daniel takes charge of it, alongside my own intelligence officers, and within 2 days, we have enough evidence to understand the true scale of what we are facing. Lord Doran was never acting alone. He had been in quiet contact for months with a hardline faction within the coalition itself, officers and commanders who never wanted the ceasefire to succeed in the first place. Men who profit from war in ways peace can never match, whether through smuggled resources, black market weapons contracts, or simple, ugly hunger for power that only chaos can provide. Together, they built a plan that relied on one simple truth, that a single dramatic act of violence, properly staged, could unravel years of careful diplomacy in a single night. They were never planning to stop with mercenaries, Daniel says grimly, standing over a table covered in intercepted communications that our combined intelligence teams have finally decoded. That was only meant to be the beginning, a failed attempt to make it look like the coalition broke the ceasefire early. When that failed, they moved their timeline forward. Moved it forward to what? I ask, though some cold instinct in me already suspects the answer. An open attack, Daniel says. Full scale. Timed for tonight, during the treaty ratification ceremony, when every official from both sides will be gathered in one place. If they succeed in disrupting it violently enough, there will be no treaty left to save. The war restarts by morning, and this time, there will be no peace offering left on the table to stop it. The ceremony is meant to be a formal gathering in the Grand Hall, sealing the treaty publicly before representatives from both empires, a symbolic end to 3 years of devastating conflict. Canceling it now would only confirm to Doran's faction that their plan has been discovered, giving them time to regroup and strike again in some other, less predictable way. We can't cancel it, I say slowly, the decision settling heavily over me even as I speak it aloud. If we do, we lose the only chance we have to end this properly, in front of witnesses from both sides who can carry the truth home with them. Then we let it happen, Daniel says, but we control how it happens. I need full authority over palace security tonight, Your Majesty. Every entrance, every guard rotation, every contingency plan. If Doran's people are moving tonight, I intend to be ready for them before they even realize their own plan has already failed. I look at him for a long moment, this quiet man who arrived on my world with nothing but a single bag over his shoulder and a name the galaxy fears, and I think of everything I have learned about him in these past weeks. The gentle mornings in the garden, the children he saved at Calith Reach, at a cost he still carries every single day, the way he stepped without hesitation between danger and a stranger 3 nights ago. You have it, I say, full authority, whatever you need. The grand hall that evening is filled with careful ceremony, delegates from both empires seated in formal rows, the treaty document itself displayed on a raised platform at the center of the room, waiting for its final, symbolic signing before the assembled witnesses. I sit beside Daniel at the head of the gathering, my crown heavy on my head, my heart pounding steadily beneath a carefully composed expression, and I try not to search the crowd too obviously for signs of the danger I know is coming. The attack begins just past the midpoint of the ceremony, when the lights along the eastern wall flicker once, twice, then die entirely, plunging half the grand hall into sudden darkness. Screams rise from the delegates as shadowy figures move through the smoke and confusion pouring in from breached side entrances, mercenaries far better equipped than the ones from 3 nights before, moving with the coordinated precision of a genuine assault force rather than a desperate scramble. But Daniel is already moving. I have never truly seen it before, not the full weight of what the reports describe, not until this exact moment, watching him cross the chaos of the grand hall with a speed and precision that seems to bend the very air around him. He is not cruel. He is not savage. What he is, I realize as I watch him move, is devastatingly, terrifyingly efficient, disarming each attacker with the minimum force necessary to end the threat. Never a moment wasted, never a motion out of place, moving through the darkness like something the shadows themselves have chosen to obey. Palace guards fall into formation around the panicked delegates, forming a protective ring as Daniel clears a path through the invading force alone. And within minutes that feel like hours stretched thin by fear, the attack collapses entirely, the remaining mercenaries either subdued or fleeing back through the breached entrances they came from. When the lights flicker back on, restored by our own emergency systems, the grand hall stands in stunned, trembling silence, delegates from both empires staring at the aftermath with wide, disbelieving eyes. Daniel stands at the center of it all, breathing steadily, unharmed, his expression grim but controlled, and for the first time, I truly understand why an entire galaxy speaks his name the way sailors once spoke of storms. Not because he is cruel, not because he enjoys what he has just done, but because there is genuinely nothing in that room capable of standing against him when the people he has chosen to protect are threatened, and every soldier who has ever faced him on a battlefield has learned that lesson the hard way, at whatever cost it demanded. Lord Doran is found among the fleeing conspirators an hour later, captured attempting to escape through a service corridor with a small case of stolen treaty documents meant to be used as false evidence of coalition betrayal. He does not resist when palace guards take him into custody. He only looks at me with something that might almost be regret, before he is led away in silence. The treaty ratification resumes an hour after that, delayed but not abandoned, delegates from both empires signing the final documents with hands that still tremble slightly from the night's events. And when it is finally, truly done, when the war that has cost so many lives on both sides is officially, formally ended, I feel something in my chest loosen for the first time in 3 long years. It is well past midnight when I finally find Daniel again, alone in the same garden where we have spent so many quiet mornings together, sitting on the same stone bench, staring up at Velsara's twin moons with an expression I cannot quite read. "You saved the treaty tonight," I say softly, sitting down beside him. "You saved everyone in that hall." "I did what I was sent here to do," he says quietly, and there is something heavy in his voice that I recognize now, the same weight Clara described from the survivor's account of Calith Reach. "I told you once that I've spent a long time trying to make sure people remember something other than the violence. Tonight, I gave them exactly the violence they were afraid of, in front of the entire galaxy's witnesses." "You gave them safety," I correct him gently. "There's a difference, Daniel, even if it doesn't always feel that way from where you're standing." He turns to look at me then, and for a long moment, neither of us speaks, the twin moons casting pale silver light across the quiet garden between us. "Can I tell you something honestly?" he asks finally. "Something I haven't said to anyone else since I arrived here." "Always," I say. "I was afraid," he admits, and the confession seems to cost him something, a rawness in his voice I have never heard from him before. "Not of the mercenaries. Not of failing to protect the hall. I was afraid of what you would see in me tonight, once it was finally over. I was afraid that after everything, after the gardens and the conversations and the quiet mornings, you'd finally look at me the same way everyone else does, like a weapon that simply hasn't gone off yet." I reach out and take his hand, the same rough, calloused hand I first felt during our betrothal ceremony weeks ago, and I hold it steadily in the moonlight. "I don't see a weapon," I say, my voice quiet but certain. "I see a man who has spent his entire life carrying the weight of protecting people who will never fully understand what it costs him. I saw that tonight, Daniel, more clearly than I've ever seen anything in my life. You didn't become dangerous tonight, you simply stopped hiding how far you're willing to go for the people you've decided to protect. And somewhere along the way, without either of us quite noticing it happen, I became one of those people to you." His breath catches, something shifting behind his eyes, and for the first time since he stepped off that quiet, unmarked shuttle weeks ago, I see him fully, without the careful mask of calm restraint he has worn every single day since his arrival. "I didn't come here expecting this," he admits softly. "I came here to end a war, Your Majesty. I never once expected to find someone who would actually take the time to ask me how I felt about how it ended." "Illyra," I say quietly. "Not Your Majesty, not tonight." He smiles then, truly smiles, for what feels like the very first time since we met, and something warm settles in my chest that has nothing to do with treaties or empires or the fragile peace we fought so hard to protect tonight. "Illyra," he repeats softly, testing the shape of my name in his mouth like something precious. "Thank you for seeing me, all of me, even the parts the galaxy is still afraid of." We sit together beneath the twin moons long into the night, the garden quiet around us, the danger finally truly past, and somewhere in that quiet, unhurried silence, I understand that whatever began as politics between us has become something else entirely, something neither the treaty nor the war ever anticipated, something real, chosen freely by two people who found each other in the middle of the worst crisis either of us had ever faced. Tomorrow, the galaxy will wake to news of the attack, and the treaty, and the man who saved it all with his own 2 hands. They will call him a legend again, a living myth, exactly as they always have. But tonight, in this quiet garden, he is simply Daniel, and I am simply Illyra, and for the first time since this entire impossible arrangement began, that feels like more than enough. 3 weeks pass before the full weight of that night finally settles into something like peace, and in that time, I watch my empire begin to heal in ways I had almost forgotten were possible. Lord Doran stands trial before the full council, his conspiracy laid bare through the evidence Daniel's investigation uncovered, communications with hardline coalition officers, financial records tracing mercenary payments back through a dozen careful shell accounts, and the damning testimony of two captured operatives who quickly abandoned any loyalty to him once faced with the full consequences of their failed attack. He is stripped of his title and his lands, exiled to the outer colonies under permanent watch, a fate he accepts in silence, offering no defense beyond a single quiet admission that he believed, wrongly, that war served the Empire better than peace ever could. The coalition officers who conspired with him fare little better, exposed to their own government through the intelligence Daniel shares freely with the Terran Accord, a gesture of good faith that does more to strengthen the fragile new peace than any formal treaty language ever could. Within days, Terran Accord Command issues a public statement condemning the conspiracy in the strongest possible terms, and for the first time since the war began, I watch representatives from both empires speak to each other not as enemies forced into uneasy compromise, but as something closer to cautious, hopeful allies. Clara finds me one afternoon in my private study, a data slate in hand, her expression carefully neutral in the way it always is when she is about to deliver something she suspects I will find surprising. "There's been interest from the wider Terran Accord Council, Your Majesty," she says. "Word of what happened here has traveled. They're asking whether Velsara would welcome a formal delegation to discuss expanding the peace beyond simply ending the war between our two empires." "What kind of delegation?" I ask. "Diplomatic," Clara says, "though I understand there are others among the humans who share reputations similar to Daniel's, legends of their own, spoken of the way soldiers once spoke of him, before any of us understood the truth behind the stories. I think of Daniel's quiet admission in the garden weeks ago, the weariness in his voice when he spoke of being reduced to nothing more than a myth in the eyes of frightened strangers, and I wonder how many others among his people carry that same impossible weight, feared for what they have done rather than understood for who they truly are. Tell them Velsara welcomes the conversation, I say. Perhaps it is time this galaxy learned that legends are simply people who were never given the chance to be seen as anything else. That evening, I find Daniel in the training yard behind the eastern barracks, working through a slow, deliberate set of exercises alone in the fading light. The same quiet discipline in every movement that I have come to recognize as entirely his own, separate from any myth or story attached to his name. Clara tells me the Terran Accord wants to send a delegation, I say, settling onto the low wall at the edge of the yard to watch him finish, to discuss something larger than just our own treaty. He pauses, wiping sweat from his brow, and turns to look at me with an expression somewhere between curiosity and careful hope. "What did you tell them?" "That we would welcome it," I say. "I understand there are others like you out there, people the galaxy has turned into legends without ever bothering to ask who they actually are underneath the stories." Something shifts in his expression, a quiet warmth I have come to recognize as uniquely his, reserved for moments when the careful mask of calm restraint slips just enough to let something genuine through. "There are a few," he admits. "Good people, mostly. People who did what needed doing when no one else could, and got turned into something larger than life for it, whether they wanted that or not. Then perhaps it's time the galaxy learned to see them the way I've learned to see you," I say. "Not as weapons waiting to be pointed at an enemy, as people, first and always." He crosses the training yard and sits beside me on the low stone wall, close enough that our shoulders touch, and for a long moment we simply watch the sun finish its slow descent behind Velsara's distant mountains together, comfortable in a silence that no longer needs filling with careful diplomacy or cautious politics. "I have a formal announcement to make tomorrow," I say finally, "before the full court. I wanted you to hear it from me first, before it becomes ceremony." "What kind of announcement?" "That this marriage is no longer simply a treaty between our two peoples," I say, turning to look at him directly. "That whatever began as necessity has become something I choose freely, without the weight of war or politics attached to it. I want the galaxy to understand that you are not simply the price I paid for peace, Daniel. You are the man I have chosen to stand beside, for reasons that have nothing to do with treaties at all." His breath catches, and for a moment he says nothing, simply studying my face in the fading golden light, as though searching for any sign that I might not truly mean it. "Are you certain?" he asks quietly. "Once that announcement is made, there's no taking it back. The galaxy will see it, Elira. Every empire, every faction, everyone who still remembers what my name used to mean before any of this began. I am certain," I say, "and I mean it more fully than I have meant anything since the night I signed that fateful paper in a war room that smelled of burnt wiring and desperate hope. I fell in love with a man the galaxy insists on calling a myth, Daniel. I intend to tell that same galaxy exactly who he really is." He reaches for my hand then, holding it gently in the fading light, and when he speaks again, his voice carries none of the careful restraint I first heard from him in that shuttle bay weeks ago, only quiet, unguarded honesty. "I never expected this," he admits softly. "Not when I agreed to this arrangement. I thought I was simply trading one war for a different kind of duty, another mission to complete, before moving on to whatever came next. I didn't expect to find someone who would look past everything the galaxy has made of me and simply choose to stay." "Then it seems we were both surprised," I say, smiling despite myself, "by exactly the same impossible thing." The formal announcement the following morning draws the entire court into the grand hall, the same hall that nearly became a battlefield only 3 weeks before, now filled instead with quiet anticipation as I stand before them, Daniel at my side, and speak the words that will carry far beyond Velsara's borders before the day is finished. "3 weeks ago," I begin, my voice steady and clear across the silent hall, "this court witnessed an attempt to shatter the peace we fought so desperately to secure. That attempt failed, not because of armies, not because of treaties written on paper, but because of one man's choice to stand between danger and the people he had sworn to protect, at a cost only he fully understands. I stand before you today not simply as your queen, honoring a political arrangement made out of desperate necessity. I stand before you as a woman who has come to know the true measure of the man beside me, beyond every story, beyond every fear the galaxy has attached to his name. Daniel Hart is not a weapon this empire acquired to end a war. He is my husband, chosen freely, and I intend to spend the rest of my reign proving to this galaxy that legends, once truly understood, are simply people who deserved better than the fear we gave them." The hall erupts into applause, delegates and courtiers alike rising to their feet, and beside me, Daniel stands quietly through it all, his expression carrying none of the careful restraint he once wore like armor, only quiet, humbled gratitude, and something that looks, for the first time since I have known him, entirely at peace. In the months that follow, word of Velsara's declaration spreads far beyond our own borders, carried by Terran Accord envoys to every corner of a galaxy that has spent years trading in fear and rumor rather than truth. Other legends begin to step forward, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence, humans whose names once silenced entire battlefields, now willing to be seen as something more than the myths built around them. Delegations arrive from empires that once trembled at rumors of Daniel's name, curious now rather than afraid, eager to understand a species capable of producing both such devastating power and such quiet, deliberate restraint. I stand often in the palace gardens during those months, watching Daniel move through the small, unremarkable moments of an ordinary life he never truly believed he would be permitted to have, tending quietly to the flower beds Clara has taught him to recognize, laughing softly with palace children who no longer flinch at the sound of his footsteps. And I think often of that first frightened night in the war room, signing my name beside his, without knowing anything true about the man attached to it. I did not marry a myth that night, though the galaxy still whispers his name that way, in awe now rather than fear. I married a man who chose again and again, in every quiet moment since, to be seen as more than the stories built around him, and in choosing to see him clearly myself, I found something I never expected to find in the desperate bargain that first brought us together. I found peace, not simply for my empire, though that alone would have been enough. I found it for myself as well, standing beside a man the galaxy calls a living legend, who has taught me, more than any treaty or crown ever could, that the truest kind of strength has always been the quiet choice to be gentle, even when the whole galaxy expects nothing but fear from you. The war is over now. The myth remains, whispered still in distant corners of a galaxy slowly learning to see past it. But here, in this garden, beneath Velsara's twin moons, there is only Daniel, and there is only me, and there is, at long last, nothing left standing between us but the quiet, ordinary happiness neither of us ever truly believed we would be allowed to keep.